Welcome back to another episode of the Field of 68's off-season grades. Rob Dauster here. I got Jeff Goodman with me, and we are going to be breaking down the Louisville Cardinals, who may or may not have made the biggest coaching upgrade in college basketball this offseason. They went from a guy that couldn't seem to get out of his own way to a coach that, at the very minimum, Jeff, is going to be able to bring a little bit of energy and a little bit of life to the Louisville basketball program. Pat Kelsey, he has completely rebuilt the roster. And a constant theme that you're going to hear from us over and over again as we kind of do these is that there's only been one high major team in the last 3 years that has brought back less than 16% of their roster and made it to the NCAA tournament. That was Iowa State in 2021-22, right? And they brought back 15.5% of their minutes. There has never been a team that has brought back less than 15% of their minutes that has made the NCAA tournament. Louisville brings back 0% of their minutes, Jeff. They bring back absolutely nobody from last season. So Pat Kelsey went out, rebuilt the roster, brought in 12 guys, spent a bunch of money on NIL, and has put together a team that is solid, that is going to be able to get up and down, that might be able to win 18 to 20 games, I think. What do you make of Louisville? What do you make of how good they are? What do you make of what Pat Kelsey did over the course of the 4 months since he got the job?
I think he did like a similar job as Mark Pope did at Kentucky, in a way. Like I think they brought in a bunch of guys that were good players, no elite players. But then again, there aren't a lot of elite players in college basketball right now. So I think he did a good job. They've got NIL. Um, they've got a bunch of I think the difference with them in Kentucky is they've got more two-way guys. They got more well-rounded players. Kentucky's got elite defensive players and then some elite offensive players. But I think what Louisville's got is more versatile players. And that's what Kelsey likes anyway. That's what he did at Charleston. They'll be a lot better defensively than they were at Charleston because they're able to recruit this level of athlete, frankly. And I think Chucky Hepburn was a huge addition. Like without
Yes.
him, they'd be in major, major trouble. They also didn't get a true big that what they wanted, but you know how high I am on James Scott. So I'm fine with that. The combo of Noah Waterman and James Scott, I think will be fine. It's just different. They don't have a bulky big.
I think that we're going to see a lot of Kayshawn Pryor kind of as like a small ball five kind of situation. If I was trying to put together a starting five or project a starting five for this group, and it's a lot more difficult for this team than it is for some of the other teams.
Yeah.
But I will say the idea of having Chucky Hepburn at the point, Corin Johnson at the two, Javon Hadley at the three, Terrence Edwards as your kind of versatile small ball four, and then Kashawn Pryor, the South Florida transfer, at the five, to me, is a fun team, a team that's going to get up and down the floor, a team that can be really creative offensively. And I do think you have enough athletes and tough guys to be able to be good enough on the defensive end with that group, especially if you're going to be playing a pressing style that, or at least an up tempo style that I'm assuming Pat Kelsey is going to want to play. And I think that's enough to be like good. And the
Yeah.
context here is the obvious comparison is going to be Kentucky, right? Because both these programs changed coaches. They're the biggest rivals. They both had to completely revamp their rosters, and they just so happen to be in the same state. Kentucky plays in a league where you have the potential number one team in America in Alabama. And then, like we talked about in that video, you have seven other teams that can really make a push for preseason top 25 and in the conversation to finish like top three in the conference. Whereas the ACC, you got Duke, then you got Carolina, and then you kind of got like a bunch of teams that are not really all that different from Louisville. They've just have coaches that have been there for a little bit longer. Wake Forest, a team like a Virginia, a team like Pitt, like a lot of teams where you're kind of looking at them and saying, "Oh, I don't really know how this thing is going to all come together," and we'll see if it works out. So uh, I think there's a real chance Louisville could end up being the third best team in the ACC. And I think there's a real chance that that third best team in the ACC is going to be right there in like the 10 seed, 11 seed bubble conversation based on the way things are kind of playing out there.
And we forget sometimes how quickly this thing could be flipped from the laughing stock in college basketball. They were 5-35 in Kenny Payne's 2 years in the ACC, in a very mediocre ACC, and that's probably being kind. 5-35. I mean, they were 12-52 overall in his tenure. They were a complete joke. So the expectations are different, right? They should be this year. Like, if they're in the hunt for an NCAA tournament berth, like, that would be good. And if they make the tournament,
look, tell me, tell me if you disagree here, but I truly believe after what Louisville fans went through the last 2 seasons, if the vibes around the program are simply fun, if this is a basketball team that the fans enjoy showing up to the Yum Center and watching, if they play like this, if they're competitive, if they win 18 games, if they go 18-13 in the regular season,
sure.
go 7-11 in the ACC, give Kentucky a fight, give Duke a fight at home, get a shot at, take a swing at North Carolina, and play, have a fun team to watch. Even if they go to the NIT, I think Louisville fans are going to be beating their chests, showing up 24,000 at the Yum Center, loud, into it. And I think that simply having the fans into it is going to put yourself in a position where you're going to win a whole bunch of games at home. The Yum Center, when the Yum Center's rocking, that is a tough place to go and play. It's an NBA arena in a college town.
And not just fun, playing hard, playing organized, looking like, and not being a shit show off the court as well. Right. So, like, and I think, again, we've talked about this after they hired Kelsey. Kelsey's the polar opposite of Kenny Payne. He's super organized. He'll have him playing hard. He's a relentless worker. He's got a plan. You know, their staff's really good. I've been around their staff a bunch. So I think, again, yeah, listen, are there some question marks? Sure. There are absolutely some question marks with this team, but they got a lot of good players. They got a lot of good, proven players that, if you look at it, came from, some pretty good programs, right? I mean, took two guys with them, and Rain Smith, who's an elite shooter who will come off the bench, and James Scott, a big man who's got all the potential in the world, long, athletic, works his ass off. And again, you surround him with Chucky Hepburn, who's won a lot of games, right? Javon Hadley had a good year last year, won some games. Terrence Edwards at the mid-major route won a lot of games last year. So, like, I think winning matters, especially in a program like Louisville, in which the culture has been so bad the last couple of years. You want a base. You want a base that, like you said, even if you're not going to the NCAA tournament this year, that everything else is done the right way so that you can build on that over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I do think it's also worth noting that with this group, I think Kelsey did a good job of adding guys that are going to be coming in and either know that they're going to be a developmental piece, kind of like a James Scott, like a Connie Ruth, someone like that, or guys that will come in expecting to play a role, right? I don't think Javon Hadley is coming in and expecting to be a guy that's going to get 17 shots a game, right? I think Chucky Hepburn kind of knows he's coming in and who he is as a point guard. Terrence Edwards might be a dude, right? Kashawn Pryor might be a guy that could end up being a star for this team. But like Abubakar Traore, Rain Smith, these guys know who they are, know what they are as players, and know that they're stepping into a high major level and they're going to be expected to play a role. I don't think you're going to have an issue with either of those guys off the bench the way that you might for some of the other programs. Like the one I make the comparison with, where I have the biggest concern, is Ole Miss, because Chris Beard went out and got a bunch of guys that were stars at the lower level, and I think that it might be difficult. That's the wrong way to phrase it. It's going to be his toughest task is going to be getting those guys to buy in. If you go from being a guy that averages 19 and 9 to being a player that's going to play 12 to 14 minutes off the bench. And I don't see that being an issue as much with Kelsey. I think the role allocation will be the easy part for him when it comes here. The problem that you run into is you don't have the same amount of talent when you run into that kind of situation. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, they don't have a dude. They don't have a dude again, but they've got a bunch of guys. But he's never had that. I mean, that's the thing. Look at the blueprint in Charleston. He's kind of brought it in a way to Louisville, which is have a bunch of good players, be deep. Now, again, the big difference is you've got guys who can really defend now, where you didn't have that at Charleston. It was primarily an offensive team that really didn't guard at a high level. Now you're able to do that a little bit better. You know, Kid Traore, transfer comes in, super athletic, can't really shoot, but again, could be really good defensively. Chucky Hepburn, we know, really good defensively. Corin Johnson's going to be interesting.
Yes.
He's going to be interesting because he was really good the last quarter of last season, and can he build on that? I just, you know, again, like it is similar. You know, they don't have that big. They missed out on a big time 5-man, and can they do it with the trio really of Pryor, Scott, and Waterman? Kind of the 5, and you know, I'd like to see him give Scott the minutes and see if he can do it. Because again, I just think he's so good defensively, and I think he's going to get better and better. He may not be ready at the first part of the season, but I think what you could get out of him down the road is you know, one of the best defensive big men in the ACC and maybe even the country down the road.
Yeah, you mentioned, I just want to elaborate on Corin Johnson. Last 8 games of last season, he averaged 18.5 points and really, really shot it well from 3. And you said there's no star. Like, if you had to bet on one guy making a big leap this offseason, I think that Corin Johnson could end up being that guy from this group. And he's actually, so we talk about X factors. I wrote him down as the X factor. There's 2. I kind of had trouble coming up with one for him because I do feel like everything about this program is an X factor. And I think the biggest question mark is going to be like, you're right. Pat Kelsey went out and tried to replicate the Charleston model at Louisville. And I just don't know if like that is always something that will necessarily translate from the mid-major to the high major level. You know what I mean? But I think, who is the star? Can Corin Johnson take a step forward? How well will it translate for Terrence Edwards? And will this idea of trying to lean into playing small ball, being a little bit more versatile, a Keyshawn Pryor potentially at the 5 kind of a situation, will that work in the ACC next year? I don't know, but I like the idea of what Pat Kelsey has put together. I question whether or not that's going to be enough to win 22 games. And I think you got to win 22, 23 games to be able to get an at-large bid out of the ACC next season.
Yeah, for me, defensive rebounding, you know, because of that 5-man spot. Defensive rebounding will be key. I think they'll be fine in the offensive glass because they're active. They're long, they're athletic, they're active, but like defensively, can they rebound at a high level? Because if you can't, there's only so much you're going to be able to get in transition, number one, and you're going to give up a lot. You're going to give up a lot to some of these teams that are going to crash the glass on you.
Whether you are a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all understand the importance of mental and physical well-being and proper recovery for top-notch performance. After a 6-month season loaded with cross-country travel, I can promise you that proper recovery is a priority for me these days. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Field of 68. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or the EE system. If you haven't heard of the EE system yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New Jersey or at one of the hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. If you're interested in experiencing the EE system technology for yourself, go to unifiedhealing.com/unified68 to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/UNIFYD, the number 6, the number 8. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment and before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, including the EE system. Yep. All right. Give me the expectations for this group. Is it NCAA tournament or bust? Is it simply have fun next season? Is it just get over 500? Where do you stand on what the expectations for Louisville should be and what they are?
No, if you're not an NIT team, it's to me, it's a failure as a season. I really believe that with the roster that Pat Kelsey and his staff have put together, you better be an NIT caliber team. And I would assume they would accept the NIT after the last 2 years if they get invited, unlike some other teams. I think if you go to the NCAA tournament, throw a parade for these dudes. Legitimately throw a parade in Louisville, in downtown Louisville, if they get to the NCAA tournament. And, I think they're a fringe, top 25-ish team right now. There's no reason to believe that they couldn't win an NCAA tournament game if they get lucky here. They've got some good pieces. They really do. They've got some pieces that fit together. They've got depth. I like them. I mean, I think they to me, somewhere in that NIT, getting in as like a 10 seed in the NCAA tournament as their ceiling. Ceiling, I guess, could be like maybe they're in the 7-10 game, right? As a 7 seed is the highest. And to me, like, again, a bad year is making the NIT.
I think that top 25 at some point this season is not out of the question. I mean, if I think I would not be shocked if there was a point where they reeled off like 8 straight wins against the middle to the bottom of the ACC and gets them to like 17-6 and they end up sneaking into the back end of the top 25. I think that's a real possibility for this year. I would set the expectation at simply getting an at-large bid. If you get into the tournament this year with Pat Kelsey, you had a very successful season. I think that getting to, like I said, 18-13 and getting to the NIT, I think is a successful season if you're playing the style of basketball that gets people engaged. You got this is not like a 1-year stop for him. This is a place where he's going to try to build and build and build and build and build, and you got to start somewhere. So, my expectations are not super high, and I would hope that that Louisville fans have some kind of perspective on this situation. All right. Give me your off-season grade for the Louisville Cardinals.
B+. I'll go B+. To me, again, the only thing they missed out on was getting that veteran big, that bulky, veteran, strong, big. They missed out on that. Otherwise, I think I would have given them an A-. But they got a good hire for them who's infused enthusiasm, energy. That was the number one thing, get the fan base back. He's done that quickly. He's brought in a bunch of good players. They have pretty good NIL from all accounts right now. And Pat Kelsey, if there's anybody that can probably raise money, I think Kels can do that fairly well. And again, like, put together a group that like has a chance. They're in the mix. We'll see what they do, but they can't go anywhere but up.
I went with a B. I was right. I wanted to go in the B- range, but I ended up going with a B. Similar to Louisville, to Kentucky's offseason for me. They didn't quite have it drag out as much for the coaching search. You kind of had like a lame duck coach for most of the year. I think a lot of people kind of assumed that this was going to end the way that it ended for Kenny Payne this season. But there was a lot of I don't know if public flirtation is the right word, but a lot of people kind of thought that the Dusty May to Louisville was going to be something that could end up happening, and you didn't get him. But I do think that they probably landed on the guy that would, and you would probably know this a little bit better than me, more or less their second option, maybe even a 1A kind of a situation with Pat Kelsey. And then he put together a roster that was solid, but didn't, I don't think that there is a star. Like we talked about this with Kentucky. Who is the NBA player on this roster? I don't know if there's a pro. And it's hard for me to sit here and say that you had an A off season when you added 12 guys and not one of them is going to end up being an NBA guy. And not one of them is someone that I look at and say, yeah, you know what? They're definitely an all ACC caliber player. So, good job. Not a great job, not a terrible job, enough to get excitement into the program and put yourself in a situation where you can be capable of making the NCAA tournament. And that is, I think, all you need to do at this point. Jeff, it's never a pleasure, but we got it done. This has been the Louisville episode of the off season grades here on the field of 68.